Hi guys, welcome to my channel, welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for clicking on this video. It is time to go through the 11 books that I read this month. I've got quite a small stack here, but I read quite a few on my Kindle and audiobooks. So let's get cozy, let's hear about all the books that I read this month. So to start these videos, I normally start off with some stats. As I've said, read 11 books last month, and the total amount of pages was 4,350, which averages around 145 pages a day, and my average page count for a book was 395.45, which is about right because I did read a couple of larger books. My most read genre was romance, and I hauled 3 books. 1 book was an ARC, 2 books were bought for me as a gift. So that's the stats. And then my TBR this month, obviously I had 8 books on my TBR like normal, and I read all 8 books. So very successful month this month, and we're gonna now go into each of the individual books. I just need to go and get one more book, I'll be back. Okay, I've got the extra book, I've got a drink, and if you're in the UK right now, I'm currently filming this on Wednesday the 30th. If you're in the UK right now, you will understand how hot it is, and I'm currently at uni, which my fan is back home. I cannot wait to be reunited. Honestly, I feel like it's just far too warm here. It's ridiculous, but let's get in. So book number 1 that I read this month was Begin Again, which was an ARC. I finished it, I think, on the 1st or the 2nd of the month. I started it last month, hoping to finish it last month, but I just struggled a little bit through this. Now, I have posted a review on my Goodreads, and that gives you kind of my detailed thoughts at the time. So it is the 4th book in a series, so I can't give you too much, but you're following an unknown male main character who has been involved in an accident whilst out for a stag do and has lost his memory. So he's an amnesia patient, and you're following kind of him coming to terms with his new life and identity. But then about a third of the way through the book, you find out who this character is, and then his significant other, because sorry, I didn't explain that very well. Because his significant other in the other 3 books, you watch 3 couples get together, so you know it's a male from one of those 3 books. Obviously then you know that there is a happy ever after romance in those 3 books. So you're then, for the second third, you're then following the female main character finding out that her husband is missing and going through the battles with everything as well. I really struggle with books like this, so I really struggle when you go kind of like a past present timeline, but this for me very much was, we got to a point where he found out who he was and was reunited with the female main character, and then you're going back to hear her story. Now, as I received it as an ARC, I am part of like the rep team for Jensen Parker, who's the author, and I spoke to her about this, and I just said it's just a personal preference for me. I understand why the book was written that way, because if you'd have written it so that the chapters were kind of coinciding, you would have figured out who he was a lot earlier. This way it's a lot of intrigue. You don't know who he is as much as he doesn't know, and that's quite nice. However, going back, you get to a point at the end of the first third, there's like a reason why things have taken as long as they have. You get to a point where you're like starting to figure that out, and then obviously you jump back and hear her side of the story. So again, I understand why it was written that way. I just didn't necessarily vibe with it that much, and it took me a lot longer to read. However, I love Jensen's writing, and as an indie author, it's just so lovely to read. I gave all the other books in this series 5-star, but this book I did give a 4-star, just purely for the fact that it did take me that little bit longer to read and get through. However, it was still a good book, and technically the books are interconnected standalones. However, I would personally recommend reading them in order. I feel like it's a bit like a Chestnut Springs vibe, where you can read them out of order, but because of such a found family and such tight connections, it makes more sense to read them in order. So I would recommend starting from Until Now and then go to Strictly Business, then the other one. Until Now, Strictly Business, let me have a look. What's the other one called? Terms and Conditions, and then Begin Again. So that's how I would recommend. However, that's up to you. Then the second book we read this month was, or I listened to this book actually on audiobook, and it's I'm Glad My Mum Died by Jeanette McCurdy. This book has been recommended by so many people to listen to because it's such a hard-hitting story, and it's a memoir about her life through her time on like like as a child actor, her time on iCarly, her time afterwards, the battles and everything she struggled with. And there is so much I just didn't realise. There was so much that, I mean, I was a child at the time of watching iCarly, so I came at it with a very naive mindset. And there's just so much that you didn't clock onto, you didn't realise, and you look back on now and it was so sad. I got recommended to listen to this one on audiobook rather than read it, just because she narrates it, so it's really nice to hear it from her. So it's her story in her words, and it was an incredible read. It was so eye-opening, just so like, it was nostalgic in a way as well, because it reminded me of parts of my childhood, but then also hearing about her struggles at the same time and seeing kind of the dark side to it was really refreshing. And yeah, no words need to be said. It was 5 stars. I feel like a memoir is always 5 stars for me. It's never and non-fiction generally, unless there's a real reason as to why not. A memoir is definitely 5 stars. I cannot judge anyone else's life, and the fact that they managed to put it down on paper is absolutely incredible. Okay, the next book I finished this month is Fearless by Lauren Roberts. Now, I've got a whole video dedicated to this, so I won't go on about it too much. Begin Again wasn't in a video, and neither was I'm Glad My Mum Died. So a few of these are, a few of these aren't. If they are, I'll signpost you to it. Obviously, I've got my Fearless release vlog where I read it for you. This is obviously, if you've seen my recent video, my signed version. I sat down and read this in a day. This book, I cried, I laughed, I giggled and kicked my feet. I ate this book up. Needless to say, it was 5 stars. I've now since been at an evening with Lauren Roberts again in my bookish video, which you would have seen. She was a gem. This was incredible. 5 stars. It's not the highest of high fantasy. This is the only fantasy I've ever really read and enjoyed. So take my review with a pinch of salt, because I'm not a fantasy reader at all. This book though, I ate it up. I ate it up. And I know it gets compared to all these other books, but I love The Hunger Games, so I feel like that's fine. And Red Queen I've not read, so 5 stars. Everyone should read it. The It Girl, this was a book that I read in my 200 pages per day challenge video. In this book, you are following Hannah, who 10 years ago found her roommate's and best friend's body dead. And you're following her 10 years on, where some things come out about potentially they've convicted the wrong person, and it was her testimony that convicted that person. And so she feels bad and she wants to work out what happened. Now, this follows a past-present timeline, which, as I've just said, I don't enjoy. It also is written in third person, which I'm not opposed to reading a book in third person. However, this way, didn't enjoy. I read this book. One of the twists at the end I saw coming. However, Ruth did pull it back, and it kind of like, it looked like it was going that way. And I literally, I think at about 80%, I literally was like, if this carries on like this, this book is like getting a 1 star. Or a 2 star. Like, it really wasn't great. And I was like, if this carries on, then I'm putting the book down. Like, that's ridiculous. I've guessed it all. However, she did pull it back towards the end with that final twist. And I think even on Goodreads, I haven't been reviewing books on Goodreads, and I feel like I need to go back to it. This book I needed to, because I literally put on there, would have been a 2 star. However, that final twist made it a 3 star. And that is the only reason. It was, yeah, I think it's the past, present, third person I didn't enjoy. Now, I read A Woman in Cabin 10 by Ruth Ware and absolutely loved it. So I'm not opposed to picking up her books again and seeing how I feel about that. But yeah, this one I didn't really enjoy. I ended up giving it 3 stars. It wasn't the best, but yeah, like I said, it was okay. And then for our finishing series vlog, we started with Daisy Jones and the Six, and this book I gave 4 stars. I listened to this book audibly because, again, with it being that interview style, everyone was like, that's the best way to pick it up, and it's got the various voice actors in there, so it really does bring it to life. It's quite immersive. I feel the issue I had with this one, and the reason why it wasn't 5 stars, is I felt like I had to keep reminding myself that it wasn't real, and that kind of took away that immersive element. Now, that is not Taylor Jenkins Reid's fault at all. It's just a personal thing. I don't know why, I just couldn't fully accept it. I couldn't fully go into the video, and therefore I struggled with this. However, the story was incredible. She did this last time as well. So the interviewer for 7 Husbands of Evan and Hugo and Daisy Jones and the Six has more to do with the plot than what is let on, but you don't find out until the end. And so I'm wondering whether Carrie Soto is back is going to have the same sort of element. I don't know. And Malibu Rising as well. I'm going to be picking up Malibu Rising next month, so that will be really interesting to see if that's the case. But I did really enjoy it. I just, like I said, something held me back from giving it that 5 stars, but I would highly recommend to everyone. The next book I read was on my Kindle, and that was The Change by, who's it by? Let me have a look. The Change by Kristen Miller. This book was a fantasy thriller mystery, which you're following 3 women who have some sort of powers. One woman is botanical, so she can grow plants and has a lot of knowledge on plants, and good plants and bad plants, plants to heal you and plants to kill you. You've also got a woman who can hear the dead, so she can hear people that need saving, quote unquote saving. So you're following the story of working out a girl who is murdered, and she could hear her and was like signaled to her. And then you're also following a woman who is a protector who has, I think it was a lot of strength, if I remember rightly. The protector one wasn't used as much. I thought this was a good read. It wasn't, this is kind of where my month kind of plateaued in terms of ratings. It was a good read. I did enjoy it. I guessed a few of the twists and turns. The twist at the end was very unusual. However, it was good. Again, I listened to it audibly on BookBeat, and something for some reason was holding it back from 5 stars. I gave it 4 stars in the end. I did think it was a very good book, and I liked the kind of fantasy elements. It was sold as a fantasy book, however I wouldn't necessarily say it was fantasy, but it does have like that magical realism fantasy elements, and so I did really enjoy that. The next book I read was The Match by Sarah Adams. I read this in my finishing series video, and I said it quite well in there that this book I picked up at the very start of April. I had a few days before I started the 200-page challenge, and I thought, a Sarah Adams book, it's cute, cozy, easy, I could probably read that in a couple of days and then start the challenge kind of straight away. I couldn't for the life of me get into this book. In fact, actually, I've got my bookmark still in there from where I stopped. I stopped at chapter 7. I couldn't for the life of me get into this book at the start of the month, and I don't know. I've read some of Sarah Adams' books before and I do enjoy the writing. It just wasn't, this book I wasn't vibing with. I then picked it up on audio through Spotify, and I ate this book up. I gave this book in the end of 4 stars. It wasn't 5-star material because I did struggle, but it was so close. I was giddy. I was kicking my feet. I loved it. I loved the dynamic with the dogs. I loved the dynamic with the child. This book was just so cutesy and cozy, but I had to listen to it on audiobook, and I don't know why. I'm going to be hopefully picking up The Enemy soon, and so I'm going to see if that's the same sort of premise and struggle. But 4 stars, solid book. I did say in my video that I would recommend this book if Sarah Adams is someone you enjoy. If she's not, maybe steer clear, because it's not the best of work if it's not someone you know you can enjoy. I missed a bit. In between all that, I read Killer Instinct. Also, in my finishing series vlog, gave this one 4 stars. This is the second book in the Natural series. You're following the same characters and you're following them continuing to solve cold cases and obviously get caught up in some FBI business. I found this book to be relatively repetitive. Now, these books aren't standalones. They're not interconnected standalones. It is a series. However, I felt like at the start of this book, all of the characters' kind of strengths were re-explained, and just re-explained in a way that made the plot feel really clunky. And I just didn't enjoy that. The plot line with one of the characters and their parent involved, again, wasn't really enjoying that much. The people involved as like the whodunit, I guessed a lot of the time. Wasn't a massive fan. I am interested because there's one storyline that kind of follows the main character, Cassie, and follows like her, and that seems to be going throughout the book, so I'm intrigued by that because this one doesn't focus on it as heavily as in book 1. However, there was something said within this book that intrigues you and keeps you hooked onto that plot point. So I am intrigued to see where the story goes and see what happens. But yeah, the first book was 5 stars, this one was 4 stars. I'm going to see how the series goes. I'm finishing off, I'm going to be reading All In next month, so we will see how it continues. If it might continue the same way, it might not. Okay, the next book I read was Part of Your World by Abby Jimenez on my Kindle. Now, in the finishing series vlog, I said I gave this one 4 stars. Now, on reflection, I've ended up giving it 3 stars. I feel in this book, you are following Alexis and Daniel, and they meet. It's like a meet cute. They meet when she's driving home and her car breaks down, and then they kind of have like a meeting, they have an interaction, and then it goes from there. Now, for me, I found this book to be very simplistic in the sense of the things that were wrong and the issues, and then the third act conflict I very much found to be quite obvious going through. But not only that, I felt like the book was rushed. I felt the ending was very much, there's the third act of conflict, this is the solution and we're done. And I know for a romance book that's pretty ordinary. However, the solution was such an interesting idea. It would have been nice to have seen that in play and to see that kind of work out. Now, I've not read Yours Truly, which is the next book, so I could see more of that in there. I'm not sure what characters they follow because they're interconnected standalones. However, that book, that like ending just felt so rushed. I felt like this big thing happened and this is how we're solving it and we're done. And I just didn't vibe with that. I did like Abby Jimenez's writing though, and so I'm definitely intrigued to carry on the series, and I've heard amazing things about Yours Truly and Just for the Summer, so I fear it does get better with the series, and so I'm determined to carry on. But yeah, wasn't the biggest fan. Honestly, the next book broke me as a person. A Man Called Ove by Frederick Backman. I went into this book thinking, oh, it's a grumpy old man, he's unlikable. I thought it's going to be like a not silly goofy time. I knew there was some sort of hard-hitting point to it, as that's Frederick Backman's writing, but I didn't quite realise how hard-hitting. I was reading this, I started reading this for my 200 pages a day challenge. I had to put it down. It reads quite slow, which when you're trying to do an amount of pages challenge is really hard, because I was sat there for hours and I read like 30 pages, 40 pages. His writing style as well was really interesting to get into. I struggled with that to start with. I did in the midpoint pick up the audiobook as well, and that kind of cut out a chunk for me so I could listen while I was getting things done. However, I feel once I got past that, I really enjoyed this book and I connected with Ove, or Ove, however people say it. In the audiobook it's Ove. I connected with him and I started seeing some of the positives. He is a very grumpy character, but that's just who he is and that he's set in his ways. And I started seeing the positives, and then the ending came and I'm broken as a person. Yeah, the ending came and broke me as a person. I literally sent a picture to my best friend. I will insert it on screen here, crying. So cheers, Frederick Backman. Thanks. I will send you my therapy bills. The last book I listened to on audiobook, I started this book, oh gosh, a while ago. It was on one of my drives. It was Radio Silence by Alice Osman. This is part of her Osman verse that I've got on my series tracker. So I've been reading Radio Silence for quite a while. I listened to it on audiobook. You're following Frances, who is an artist and she likes to draw, and then she becomes friends with a guy called Alid, and they have some way of creating this connection, and there's a secret that both of them are holding that connects them slightly more. And Alid's sister went missing a few years ago, and there's all a connection between it all. It all does connect in the end. This very much follows like a podcast, so in elements you listen to the podcast, you're listening to text messages. Now, I fear Alice Osman's writing isn't for me. Her graphic novels of Nick and Charlie, incredible. I eat them. I just love them so much. I love their story. I love their vibe. Her writing is, this book especially felt very YA. I say that not as a negative. I fear if I was a teenager going through, I mean, I went through a few things when I was a teenager, especially with like exams and stress and finding yourself, and a few people within my school kind of coming to terms with their sexuality and gender, and me kind of internalizing that as someone who isn't necessarily going through those struggles but trying to like sympathize and empathize. I feel like a book like this, and all her books that she's written, cover such hard-hitting topics that would have helped at the time. However, now as a 26-year-old, not saying I know everything, because I don't, and I listen to these books and I read these books and I'm like, oh my gosh, that's what that means, or oh wow, I've got a bit more insight into this sexuality or this gender or why people feel this way. And she writes about it in such an accessible way. However, I'm not the demographic for this, and I fear that shows. I have one more of her books, her written books, I think it was I Was Born This Way, which I'm going to listen to, and then I will make a decision from there whether I want to carry on with her book that I've written, or whether I just want to continue on with the graphic novels. But I did enjoy it. I ended up giving it 3 stars. I thought it was a very interesting story. The lessons learned in this book were incredible. Like I said, she wrote about it in such an accessible way. However, it's just I'm not the demographic, and so therefore I didn't enjoy it as much as I probably should. So that's why it was 3 stars. But this obviously was an incredible reading month. I read 11 books. I did read a few more than on my pile, but thank you so much for kind of sticking through my waffling in this video. I hope all those kind of explanations made sense. I have a very exciting TBR this month. I have a few very exciting plans this month as well. I go on holiday, so you'll get some holiday content. And yeah, thank you so much for watching. Before I go, in my bookish video, I unboxed my book box subscription, and I got given a discount code for the book box that my viewers and people that I know can use. So I'm going to put it on the screen now for you. It is just TIBC, all in capital letters, @TIBCLAURENH. I will have it linked down in the description as well, links to the website and my discount code. This code gets you, I don't know, does give you some money off when you go to checkout, and every time it gets used, I get entered into a draw with a potential of winning a prize. So I don't get any kind of monetary value, but I could win a prize, and I will let anyone know on Instagram if I end up winning due to people using my code. But thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'm really hoping for another great reading month this month. I will see you guys soon. Bye.